Latin from scratch, comparison of adjectives. This module is to have some rest after the two previous modules, which were quite difficult with cum, ut, etc. So comparison of adjectives is going to be quite easy, okay? Let's study first the syntactic structures of comparison in Latin and then the morphology of synthetic comparative adjectives. Don't freak out yet. Yeah, a few things we will study now, but not hard. Syntactic structures of the comparison in Latin. There are three types of comparison, just like in English. Superiority, more than, or for example, imagine like more fantastic than or bigger than. Okay, so that's superiority because it's more than whatever. Equality, which is as big as whatever, and inferiority, which is less big than. Which of course, you know that usually we don't really use this because we don't say less big. We would just say smaller, okay? But you could say that. Okay, so how do you do this? Like more than, as, less than. Magis quam, tam quam, and minus quam. There was a typo which was too important to keep it there, so I have to do some magic there. But okay, so magis quam, tam quam, minus quam. Quite easy, quite straightforward. Then, the most frequent comparison, as you might imagine, is superiority, which can also be expressed in an alternative way, plus quam. So instead of magis quam, plus quam. It's just an alternative. Most of the times in Julius Caesar and the text that we usually work with is going to be magis quam, but we might also find plus quam. In all three structures, the adjective before quam and the word after minus, tam, or magis are in the same case. Also the noun after quam. So I know that there's like a lot of things going on here, but it is easier than it looks, okay? So Antonius, subject, Antonius minus tam magis altus quam Petrus est. So because Antonius is the subject, then we have, so let's do it like that, okay? Subject, Antonius est, the verb. Now, this is the attribute. Antonius est minus tam magis altus. So, of course, the attribute, we know that goes in the nominative case. And then quam Petrus, this is the second member or part of the comparison. It has different names, but we can like second member of the comparison, second part of the comparison, whatever. So in this case, Petrus also goes in the nominative, okay? So that's it. Everything goes in the nominative for now. We will see later. So Anthony is less as tall, taller than as Peter. You see that actually here English is more complicated than Latin because I have to do all these slash things, okay? Then, deditivi, I mean, I know that this sentence is kind of like cheesy, but okay. Deditivi donum minus tam magis dulce quam mellem. So here we have the verb, so I gave you donum. It should be I owe. Okay, I'm writing this in Spanish. I owe, indirect object, direct object. And now, this also, this could be, I mean, actually, we can just have it everything as direct object, or we could kind of say that this is the predicative of the direct object. It really doesn't matter, okay? And then, so donum, since this is accusative, then dulce. Dulce is accusative because donum is neuter, no? And then quam mellem, again, second part of the comparison, mellem in the accusative. Okay, so quite simple. For now, everything is in the same case, all three things. Now, about the noun after quam, so this and this, okay? About this, term of comparison, second part of the comparison, second member of the comparison, whatever. It is actually more frequent to use the ablative without quam. However, this can only be used when the word being compared is in the nominative or the accusative. So, for example, here, but we could also be comparing, for example, the indirect object. In that case, we cannot use this ablative, okay? So let's see. Antonius minus tam magis altus Petro. So Petro in the ablative without quam or without anything. Deditivi donum minus tam magis dulce melle. Okay, so melle in the ablative without quam. And as I was saying, this is the most frequent, is more frequent than with quam and the same case. Okay, so that's the syntax. Quite simple, okay? Now let's go with the morphology of synthetic comparative adjectives. So what is this about synthetic? This is a word which we already kind of know from previous lessons, okay? But synthetic is pretty much, as we are going to see, is in one word. So for example, in English, tall, taller. Taller is one word. But for example, if we say fantastic, we cannot say fantasticer, we have to say more fantastic. Okay, so then more fantastic is two words. That's not synthetic. Okay? This is the, so only the superiority comparative, just like in English. Okay, in English, only the superiority can be synthetic. This is the preferred form in classical Latin. It is formed in the following way. Because what am I saying here about this is the preferred form in classical Latin? In English, you are kind of not supposed to say more tall. You have to say taller, always. Okay? In Latin, you can kind of say both. So for example, we could say altior, which is the preferred in classical Latin, but we could also say plus altus. Okay? Anyway, how is the synthetic form formed? Root of the adjective and the suffix ior, masculine, feminine, or ius, neuter. Now, regardless of the original declension of the adjective, these superiority comparatives are always declined according to the third declension consonant stem. Okay, so of course, ior, ius, is third declension consonant stem. Okay, so we are going to see that, for example, here we say pulcriores. Okay, we are going to see Antonius altior quam Petrus Petro est. So this is masculine because Antonius is masculine, nominative because Antonius is nominative, and singular because Antonius is singular. Then deditivi donum dulcius. This is neuter because donum is neuter. And now, pulcriores, puellae pulcriores, quam pueri or pueris sunt. So, because puellae is nominative plural feminine, then we need nominative plural feminine. Now, we mentioned the synthetic superiority comparative is the preferred form in classical Latin, but they have a limitation. The adjectives whose root end in a vowel cannot be formed in such a way. For example, from caeruleus, because remember that we said these synthetic comparative forms, we take the root of the adjective and then add the suffix. So imagine that we take the root, so caerule, this is the root, so it ends in a vowel. So now if we say ior, then caeruleior. You see that it doesn't really work, no? Caeruleior. So you cannot say that. So in this case, you have to always say magis caeruleus. So magis and the normal adjective. Okay, this is kind of a similar limitation that you have in English. That, for example, you cannot say amazinger. You have to say more amazing or fantastic or whatever. We have seen how to form most synthetic comparative forms, but of course there are some, only these 5, okay? Irregular comparatives. Bonus bona bonum, melior melius. And actually you see, like you might know these words or kind of these words from Spanish, French, Italian, even in English, no? So minor, no? So minor, major, etc. So bonus bona bonum, melior melius. Malus mala malum, peior peius. So of course it would be better, worse, bigger, smaller, and from multus, multa, multum, it's plures, plura. And of course, you see that it's already, it only appears in the plural because plures, okay, plures, plural, okay? It can only appear in plural. And last, intensive comparative use. Although this is a syntactic matter, so we should have studied it before the morphology, but it seems more intuitive to have it last since it is not a very frequent use of the comparative, no? So, I mean, this is like, until here is kind of like the important part of the class, and now this is like the least frequent and least important part of the class, okay? But still, we are going to do it. The forms in ior or ius may be used as intensive comparative adjectives when there is no term of comparison and it is not obvious from the context. We are going to see now with the example. In these cases, we can translate as quite, to, very, etc., depending on the context. So, of course, a comparison is like you compare something to something, no? Quite obvious. So, and this to something is the, we said, the second part of the comparison, the term of the comparison, whatever, no? But what if there is no term of comparison, like here, Antonius altior est? So, at first we would say, Anthony is taller. Taller than what? Okay, so at first it looks like it's incomplete, but no, because there is this use that Anthony is quite tall, or very tall, or too tall, depending on the context, okay? Here there is no context. And then, also important, and it is not obvious from the context, because here again, this sentence is isolated, there is no much context, but imagine that we were saying before, no? Like, imagine that we say, for example, Petrus altus est. So we said, Petrus altus est. And now we say, Antonius altior est. And of course, we don't say Antonius altior est quam Petrus. We don't say Antonius altior est Petro. But, I mean, this quam Petrus is kind of from the context, no? That, of course, we are referring that he's taller than Petrus, whom we said just before that he's tall. But Antonius is even taller. Okay? So this is what I mean by no term of comparison, there's no term of comparison, and it is not obvious from the context, because, for example, we just mentioned something, okay? Okay, so that's it, that's the comparative degree. Now let's see the other comparative, the other degree of adjectives, which is the superlative.